I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm your host, Clint Richardson, and with me today are my guests, Vicky Davis of ChannelingReality.com, and a gentleman that we had on not too long ago named Bob Burton from Florida, who's been battling the Agenda 21 villains that be down there. It was a very interesting show, and I thought I'd get us all together to have a bit of a round table today on Agenda 21, considering it's the 20th of the month, and I'm not going to be here tomorrow. We do have a great pre-recorded show to remind you tomorrow that I highly recommend with Dr. Tim O'Shea from The Doctor Within. Does some wonderful seminars and has a great book called Vaccination is Not Immunization, something I've been yelling from the top of my lungs for a very long time. Join us tomorrow for that, and then I'll be back on Friday. Let's see. I wanted to start today by making people understand how important it is for the folks in the Agenda 21 model internationally to, especially in this country, to attack at the local level. Now, when I say local level, I mean state, county, municipality, and district. It is so important for the treaties and agreements and all of those things to happen within the local area. And I've never considered why that is until I was doing all this research for Common Core and trying to understand the massive, massive structure that's involved with that. And again, why is Common Core being passed on the state level and not federally? Well, I suddenly figured out that if just 5 more states pass it on the state level, then the federal government can then pass it on the federal level and not be going against what it can do according to its own constitution. In other words, it can alter the form of government we have because all the states are then in agreement. So I want to read you just a few things before we get to our guests. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution says the President shall have the power by and with advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur with that treaty. Okay. Now, as far as treaties go, a properly legally concluded U.S. treaty overrules any state law and any state constitution. This is a very, very important concept when dealing with international laws that are trying to be implemented on the federal and state level. So a U.S. treaty overrules any state law and any state constitution. But a properly legally framed U.S. treaty does not, may not, cannot, and is forbidden to overrule the U.S. Constitution or abrogate the sovereignty of the United States. So when federal government passes a treaty, it cannot alter the very structure of government. This would be like Walmart suddenly creating a new rule within Walmart that goes against its corporate charter. It cannot happen. Okay, if it does, it's not bona fide. It's a usurpation, basically. It is not under the authority of the United States to make such a treaty that would alter the Constitution. In order to do that, of course, we have to have all the conventions and all that. Treaties made or which shall be made, according to the Constitution, that violate the U.S. Constitution by subjugating the United States to an outside power are prohibited. They are of no effect. That legally and lawfully they cannot have effect. They're null and void. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, goes a little deeper. Says the Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. A very, very dangerous, dangerous clause. A dangerous term there. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by the Constitution and the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. Now, according to the Articles of Confederation, each state retained its sovereignty, freedom, independence, and all that. But then the necessary and proper clause came along in the Constitution, which then expressly conferred these powers upon, incidental powers upon Congress, which no other clauses in the Constitution really do by themselves. And it basically creates an unlimited, almost, loophole to create what is deemed necessary and proper. You have such things as the emergency powers of the president, which we talk a lot here. Even if they are against the ideals of the Constitution. That's the important part about the necessary and proper clause. If it's necessary, we can create something that goes against the Constitution. Treaties, however, do not apply in this case because they would not fall under the necessary and proper case. The Federalists argued that the necessary and proper clause would permit only the execution of power already granted by the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists argued that this clause would grant the federal government, the central government, boundless power. Unfortunately, I think the Anti-Federalists, as we've seen, were correct. At the Virginia Ratifying Convention, Patrick Henry took the opposing view, which was the Anti-Federalist view, stating that the clause would lead to limitless federal power that would inevitably menace individual liberty. The problem here, again, is that we are talking about an outside threat, an outside thing called the United Nations trying to come in and take over the government. Now, I want to read one more thing and then we'll get to our guests. This is from a Yale law brief, actually. It says the necessary and proper clause gives Congress the power to make all laws necessary for carrying into execution all other powers vested by the Constitution, the treaty power included. The treaty power grants the President and the Senate power to make all treaties on behalf of the United States, whether those treaties are self-executing or not. Okay, but some treaties are beyond the federal government's power to implement. They can make all the treaties that they want. That doesn't mean they can implement them according to the Constitution. And that is because they are beyond the federal government's power to make those treaties in the first place. A treaty may not, according to this Yale law brief, a treaty may not contravene the Constitution and may not cause what the plurality, in Reed versus Covert, referred to as a change in the character of government. A treaty that violates the Constitution is not a valid treaty. Now, with that all said, how can Agenda 21, how can the United Nations then come in and create what we call sustainable development, or Agenda 21? How can they come in and create a systematic or uniform set of rules, regulations, codes, and laws unless they go to the local level? They cannot literally go to the federal level because the federal level would federal government would never be able to pass such a treaty or agreement. But on the local level, like the Common Core standards, if every state agrees and if every municipality and every county and every school district and everyone else agrees with Agenda 21, well, then by passing a federal law at that point, it would make no difference. I mean, it would be an agreement. Everybody would be in consensus. Everyone would be happy and joyful. With that, and I think we're going to go to commercial here, but I'd like to introduce you again to Vicky Davis of Channeling Reality. How you doing, Vicky?
Hi, Clint. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Mr. Bob Burton, are you there?
Yes, I am. Doing well.
Great, great. All right, folks, when we get back from the break, I really want to hit this hard because we need to understand that it's our complacency at the local level as the citizen, quote unquote, that is allowing this stuff to happen. We'll be back. Stay with us.
He's a rebel. hustler and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a problem with his poisons, but you know we'll find a cure. He's cleaning up the systems to keep his nature pure.
All right, folks, welcome back. We are on the line with Mr. Bob Burton and Miss Vicky Davis from channelingreality.com. Now, Bob, you don't really have a website per se. You've just been fighting this battle on your own state and local level. And am I correct? It's Florida, right? Not Georgia?
Yes, and Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, the whole Southeast. We actually work on a case-by-case basis.
All right. Well, now I never realized this before. I never really quite understood the importance of attacking at the local level until just recently, until I really understood this concept of how treaties and agreements and contracts and all that stuff works. And I got to tell you, this brings a whole new urgency to waking up people at their local level and allowing them to find their own Agenda 21 plans. Now, I found our plan in Salt Lake City here. It's just for the city, but I'm sure there's more to it than just Salt Lake City. For instance, one of the things that Vicky Davis talks about a lot are what's called economic development, foreign trade zones and the such. Well, I found a foreign trade zone in Salt Lake City, and it is funded by the Rockefeller Group Development Corporation. Let me say that again. Rockefeller Group Foreign Trade Zone Services is developing the Salt Lake City Foreign Trade Zone. Now, Vicky, can you tell people real quick what a foreign trade zone is?
Well, the idea of a foreign trade zone originally was that, and the first law was passed in 1934. It was supposed to be in response to Smoot-Hawley, where manufacturers could locate and produce goods outside of the taxing area. They would produce goods to export. That was the idea of it. But over the years, they changed it, and basically they removed all restrictions on what kind of businesses could be in a zone. And a zone is essentially a separate territory. It's outside the what do they call it? It's like a customs area. It's like no man's land in the airport. But of course, it's a geographical area that is defined under a different set of laws than the rest of the area.
It's hard to explain, isn't it? Because listen to what this says. It says, what is a foreign trade zone? This is from our little website here. It contradicts itself, and this must be very confusing for people. It says foreign trade zones, FTZs, are federally designated secure locations in the United States. But then the next sentence says, the major advantage of merchandise admitted into a federal trade zone is that it is treated as though it were located outside the United States for customs duty purposes. How confusing.
Right. Hence, you can think of it as a port, like a port on the ocean is a separate area under control of the harbor master. And the harbor master essentially has the same powers over the harbor as a ship's captain has over a ship. Because they, throughout history, what ended up happening is that the harbor master needed equal authority to a ship's captain. And so it just kind of evolved that way. And so these foreign trade zones, inland ports, essentially become the same kind of construct. Once they've built it, once they've layered on the designations and the approvals and all of the rest of the stuff, it can actually become an inland port.
And, as we discussed in our last show, they then have to create a way to be able to transfer things from different countries into the United States without ever actually setting foot on the United States. And so they turn these, what they call corridors, or basically the larger freeways, such as NAFTA, those super highways and those sorts of things, all kinds of different ones. And they literally turn those into what we have referred to as virtual waterways. So in order to get to the port that is not on water, you must have a waterway that is not actually water. And so we have virtual virtual waterways that are made of cement. I find that very, very devious.
And the key word here is sovereignty. These areas and the corridors have their what are referred to, or what used to be referred to, as sovereign areas. I believe your general public is becoming more and more aware of the meaning of words like sovereignty, so they've backed away from using that.
Mm. Are we saying that a police or a highway patrol, for instance, would not be able to necessarily stop one of these if it was just coming from Mexico or Canada or wherever? I guess it would have to come through Mexico, though. Necessarily, they would not be in the United States. They would not be in the sovereign nation. Therefore, they would not have the right to search the truck per se, or do any, confiscate anything in the truck, even if it's cocaine or something like that.
Well, they would have an immunity.
Well, but okay, now here's something interesting that I found out about Idaho. Idaho actually does have a Coast Guard here. Of course, we do actually have a water port up in northern Idaho, but you would need, I would think, a federal officer to stop one of these international transports, whether it be a naval officer or Coast Guard, or I'm not sure about the merchant marines. I'm not sure, what their level of authority is, but that's really kind of a sticky wicket,
It certainly is. And the other thing is there's no duties on the things that are put into these foreign trade zone warehouses, and this warehouse talks about over 500,000 square feet of warehouse space. They could basically put anything in there they want, and it can stay there for an unspecified amount of time. In other words, unlimited amount of time. And who knows what's in the boxes, because they're not going to be, there's no rule that says they have to be accounted for. It's really kind of frightening when you think about it. I mean, what a great way to bring bombs into the country, or anything for that matter.
Yeah, or to set up a situation where local officials can be blackmailed, do this or else,
Yeah.
head for your nearest bomb shelter.
Well, and all of this is obviously happening for two reasons. Obviously, the federal government is pushing it like you wouldn't believe. But what's more important is that the federal government is offering cities, counties, and states federal funding to implement these things. Because, again, the federal government knows that it cannot implement a lot of this stuff on the local level itself, and it cannot do it through altering its structure or character of the Constitution. So it must make this happen on the local level. And that's what I really want to talk about today, is how do we make people aware of this, first of all, on the local level, and how do we fight it? Here we're going to the music, and I know, obviously, sir, you have fought this a lot, Bob, so we'll start off with you when we get back. Stay tuned.
How's the people living in the street? Oh, there's a solution.
Science is simply battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously.
resets start in a swarm of energy. All our sensory sets start, and then it explodes into this enormous collage.
All right, folks, welcome back.
Of what this present moment
Yeah, we're trying to get to the bottom of this whole Agenda 21 thing, and it's such a massive mess. And it's designed to be almost an abstract so that most people cannot really figure this out without massive tomes of research and understanding. Now, one of the ways that this is implemented, of course, into the local communities is through nonprofit tax-exempt private associations, non-governmental organizations, and then implemented through public-private partnerships, uniform laws, best practices, master planning. I mean, there's just so many different aspects and names for almost the same thing. So, Bob, now I know you've been fighting this for some time. Can you tell us, just recap the story that you told us about how you caught the state basically polluting, and how you got into all this?
Well, we were. That was kind of a small part of it. It was just kind of a sidetrack that we would not have noticed what was going on had we not known other things. But we caught the state in 3 different locations in Florida, got 2 of them on film actually tainting water tests, poisoning watersheds so they could come in and to do water tests and then say, oh, we have pollution, and that would give them an excuse to come in and take authority over resources, in this case being water.
And they would blame that on the public, basically.
Oh, absolutely. It was always septic tanks. And here they are actually unleashing unbelievable amounts of pollution into our waterways, intentionally. But what we were finding was the people behind it were organizations such as Associated Industries, in this case Associated Industries of Florida, National Association of Manufacturers, which are secret organizations. They do not divulge who their members or their board of directors are, and of course we've been able to find many of those members. And they are mostly foreign or multinational corporations, but they want you to think that it's little mom-and-pop organizations that they're lobbying for. But these guys are winding up with huge contracts to build all of our water treatment systems and that kind of thing. They're coming in telling people like you and me that they're for the free market. What they're for is free market for these multinational corporations, and at the same time they're pushing for massive legislation to regulate mom and pop out of business.
That's funny, because behind all of these plans, there's always the finger being pointed at the very public it's designed to control. Every aspect of this, from global warming to pollution to everything is basically pointing at us, and never addressing the actual real problems, which are these big corporations. It's brilliant.
Well, it's these big corporations and these international agreements. I think the design of the global system is that corporations are going to be running everything because they can, quote, marshal the resources, unquote. That comes from a guy named Michael Porter. And he's a professor from Harvard, and he's very involved in the design aspect of the new economy. So,
Design
nobody should be under any delusions that we have a free economic system, free enterprise, capitalism in this country. That is gone. We have a centrally planned economy. They are just, they're really coming out of the closet now. They've been around for quite a long time, but they were coming out of the closet now, and they're getting militant about implementing the agenda.
Very militant. We had 15 guys enter our home with M16s and Power Ranger costumes, and they took everything we had to try to just keep the public unaware. We had put up 2 YouTubes. They took them down in less than 24 hours and came to our home and carried off everything: phones, cameras, editing equipment, computers, all that.
Well, to be fair, Bob, you did threaten them. Why don't you tell people how you threatened them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, finally, when we get the depositions back, this is a super lobbyist for Associated Industries. The threats he came up with was that I was talking about what they were doing around the state and that I had threatened to run for Senate against Senator Charlie Dean.
Oh, my gosh. You beast.
Well, and something that you don't see anymore, there used to be a website the United Nations had called their keyword documents. And one of those words was decentralization. And they spoke in there about decentralizing governments, not just in the United States, but all over the world, and having the local authorities answer directly to the United Nations through the UNDP.
What document was that, or what?
Well, the key word was decentralization, and they have a decentralization program. But now you can't hardly find much about decentralization on it. Earlier, before people had heard of Agenda 21, they were very open about it, and they explained why they wanted to use decentralization. And they called it actually devolution, decentralization, and there was a third word they used. But they were very open about about decentralizing government, taking it away from the federal government, and they could more easily control the local governments, just like you were saying. And then, of course, there's going to be also legal aspects.
Well, that's really what they've been doing. They, even though it seems to most people that the federal government is all-powerful in everything, really they have been devolving power down to the regional level. And they've created these regional organizations, the Regional Economic Development associations.
That's the new key word, right?
Well, they've been around since about 1975, but they were really pretty low profile. But now they're really coming out and doing their central planning out in the open. What I would say is out in the open. But most people in the communities, of course, don't understand who they are and how they fit into the picture of anything. To the average citizen, if they know about them, they just think they're kind of a private sector group that works with the federal government and with the cities. Well, this is the way it was explained to me. They work with the cities to help them get money for things like new fire trucks. They help with the financing and that sort of thing. Well, they actually do a lot more than that. But
it's consultative status.
Pardon me?
They refer to it as consultative status.
Yeah. But actually, they are the drivers of the economy. So.
Well, and that's where if you go out and start rattling the cages of those guys, that's where you have all of a sudden people who don't know any better at your gate shooting up your house, and they will, because they're being told, well, these people don't want you to have a job. We're trying to improve the community. We want your son to have a job. We want, your children to have jobs. We're doing this for you, and these people they're anti-you. They literally do a lot of propaganda to confuse the public, where you need that public to support you to counter what these guys are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, they all they do is hammer on the idea of these new companies coming in. They're going to create jobs. It's going to be good for the community. It's, but they don't really explain to the taxpayers that how much their property taxes are going to go up, because they have to rebuild the water system and they have to rebuild the wastewater treatment facility, and all of that kind of goes underground in something called tax increment financing. So there is a lot of propaganda that goes with this agenda.
Well, and Now, last time I had you on, Bob, you said that there's not just a few, organizations and corporations that are involved in this, that there are literally thousands and thousands of corporations, whether they be nonprofit NGOs or whether they be full-fledged, monster corporations. It seems to be almost becoming a prerequisite that if you're going to do anything in society, or if you're going to do anything economically, that you're going to have to play by these rules.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
We don't play by the rules, but
Nope.
This is Dr. Robert Rowan here to give you an important message regarding stem cell treatment. World-renowned physician, stem cell expert, and friend Dr. David Steenblock has performed over 8,000 stem cell treatments since 2001. Bone marrow stem cells are completely legal to do here in the USA. The bone marrow stem cell treatment is not only fast, done in less than 2 to 3 hours, but is relatively pain-free and has little to no recovery time. Dr. David Steenblock and his office are able to help and treat patients who suffer from cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, stroke, macular degeneration, arthritis, Parkinson's disease, congestive heart failure, and more. Personally using their services for my knee and seeing great improvement, Dr. David Steenblock is highly recommended by me. Go to stemcellmd.org or call 800-300-1063 to find out more. Again, stemcellmd.org or call 800-300-1063 today to receive more information.
Do you flinch when a police car appears in your rearview mirror, or you get pulled over?
Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. Up and down, round and round, and it's very loud.
All right, folks, welcome back. Again, we're with Vicky Davis here of today, channelingreality.com, a website I highly recommend for all people who are interested in studying and learning the way their government is really being manipulated and run. And also Bob Burton, who we interviewed not too long ago, and fantastic freedom fighter for the cause of the people against this international thing that's going on. Now, Bob, you mentioned the concept of decentralization, which, again, is one of those topics it's very hard for people to understand, because decentralization is the only way that can lead to United Nations centralization. So you must decentralize before you come back full circle and have a centralized focus through Agenda 21 principles. I want to read for folks, if you're not familiar with the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, social welfare and social justice program in Article 22 of that declaration states that everyone is a member of society. Okay, when it says society, it means global society. It doesn't mean United States, doesn't mean this country or that country. It means every single person on earth under the United Nations. Everyone, as a member of society, has the right to social security and is entitled to realization through national effort and international cooperation, and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state. Now, keep in mind that each country or nation is a state of the United Nations. I'm not talking about United States. We're talking about the United States being a state of the United Nations. Of the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and the free development of his personality. So, international cooperation through forced legislation. It's a messed up thing. Now, what it talks about here is the right to Social Security. Now, we've talked about this before on the show, although I haven't covered it in depth. And that Social Security is being run by the International Social Security Association, a United Nations front, that also is being run by the World Bank. So the International Social Security Association is the principal international association or institution bringing together Social Security agencies and organizations. The ISSA's aim is to promote dynamic Social Security as social dimension in globalizing the world by supporting excellence in Social Security administration. Okay, folks, over 130, I believe, countries in the world have Social Security. We are not unique. In fact, we didn't get our Social Security. It was founded in 1927, this International Social Security Association. We didn't get ours till 1935. Okay, so Social Security was not some idea that America came up with that was just wonderful for the retirement. No, this is a world program. First of all, everyone must be assigned a number of this massive United Nations beast. Second of all, as we just read, Social Security is a integral part of the national effort and international cooperation to make everyone, as a member of the global society, have the dignity and free development of his personality. All these wonderful, wonderful little words. Lastly but not least, the United Nations Educational and Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, in its International Conference on Education for a Sustainable Future in 2003, it said this: the UN has declared 2005 through 2015, quote, the decade of education for sustainable development, and has designated UNESCO as the lead agency for its promotion. Its goal, quote, to integrate sustainable development into all levels of education in order to promote education as a key agent for change. That's global change in accordance with sustainable development, which is another word for Agenda 21. This is why I'm so concerned with Common Core, because Common Core is also very much a part of what we're talking about today. So, Bob, again, we're talking about just these thousands and thousands of corporations and non-governmental associations, all a part of this, all being a part of this to implement this, again, on the local and state level.
Yes, they are operating, they have to operate at the local and state level because that's where your resources are also. They have to, in order to control you and to take your private property at home where you live, they want to operate through your local, it's your local sheriff who can come arrest you. They want to control him. They want to control your county commission, and of course they pay them off, they place them. They actually control elections at the state and local level. People don't think of their county commissioners and they're usually not really sophisticated people in your more rural counties, but they are actually groomed and chosen by these organizations, and then they will go and get certified by these organizations to be certified county commissioners. Even a little town like ours, they go to these multinational corporate, I don't even know what you call them, they're educational, continuing education type things for an elected official.
That's the benefit of all this certification, They make people go jump through hoops. They're even trying to do that with the sheriffs. Here in Idaho, there was an initiative to require that in order to be a sheriff in Idaho, that they had to have this post certification. Well, the problem is obviously that the sheriff is an elected position. So they can't impose certification on an elected position. So.
But they're going to try anyway, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're going to try. Yeah.
Well, what they're doing, especially like down here in Salt Lake, is they're creating new districts and putting law enforcement into the districts, and that way, in order to be CEO of the district, then the sheriff has to understand all of this stuff, and that's how they're making it happen. It's making him wear two hats, basically, one of the lawful elected sheriff, the other of the CEO of the basically corporate structure that is the law enforcement district that they created down here. And if folks want to learn about that, I wrote extensively on that. It's called the Sheriff Who Sold His County. If you just type that in, you'll be shocked at what's happening all over the country with this districting of law enforcement, unification, they call it, of fire departments and everything else. Vicky, I'm not that familiar with UNESCO. Can you, I know we're going to go to a break here real quick, but can you tell us about a lot more about UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization?
Yeah, they started out to be, they are one of the main bodies of the United Nations. They started out as an NGO, but I think then they became, I can't remember what the word for it is, but they are like an agency of the United Nations. And their function is really to be the thought leader, the organizer for all things social and educational. And so, they're a really important agency for anybody that really wants to understand the social agenda of the United Nations. They really ought to look at UNESCO.
Well, the word social is a word I see a lot, and especially within the Common Core standards, everything has to be social media and social this, social justice, social everything. What does that mean exactly? What when we're talking about the word social, it seems to have a meaning that I don't fully understand.
Well, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, we used to call them communists. And I never really understood and never learned the definition of fascist until I started doing this research. And I realized now, I'll make up my own definitions when the ones that I'm given don't fit. And so I believe that what socialism is, it's communism, collectivism for the majority, but the system is actually fascist. It's run by the corporations and the wealthy elite. They determine the policy, and then the operatives on the ground are actually the communist collectivizers that implement the policies.
Yeah, I came to the same conclusion. It's a little bit of all the isms all rolled into one. We'll be back, folks, for the second hour of the Corporation Nation. Stay with us.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint Richardson. With me today is Vicky Davis from Channeling Reality and Mr. Bob Burton from Florida. That's all I can say. He doesn't have his he doesn't have the websites or anything up. He's just a marauder, a soldier in the fight, and very important one at that. Well, I was just directed by someone in the chat room. By the way, the chat room is corporationnation.chattango.com. to the UNESCO website on which is United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and their little homepage on education. And here's what it says. Environmental Perspectives covers several major themes reflecting diverse goals and audiences, including water, climate change, biodiversity, and disaster prevention. There can be no long-term economic or social development on a depleted planet. teaching society, that's the world society, how to behave responsibly towards the environment lies at the core of education for sustainable development. Building on more than 30 years of experience in environmental education, education for sustainable development must continue to highlight the importance of addressing the issues of natural resources, water, energy, agriculture, and biodiversity as part of the broader agenda for sustainable development. In particular, UNESCO must encourage new behaviors to promote the world's natural resources. Now, this all sounds just wonderful. It just sounds like some group of well-intentioned beings got together and created an agenda to help the planet. We're gonna help the planet not get depleted of resources from those nasty humans. But the reality is, as we discussed with Bob, is quite different than that, isn't it? It's when you catch the same Agenda 21 people who are promoting responsibility in the environment, actually purposefully tainting the water supply so as to gain a benefit and a profit by being the government contractor to fix that problem. We start to see the reality of, and we start to see beyond the pretty and natural touchy-feely words that are used by these. And Bob, you're the obviously the perfect example to put that to rest.
Well, and there are a lot of examples. You don't hear about them. They don't make the news. They're not usually in your resistance movements, your tea parties, and that kind of thing. There are a lot of us out there, and I sniff them out and find them just so I'm not alone. But absolutely, it's all about stealing all of the resources and monopoly. They're the monopolizers, just like they always have been. At the local, and back to going to the local level, and back to going to your NGOs. With UNESCO, Rotary International wrote the preamble to the UNESCO Constitution. They arranged for the creation of the United Nations and UNESCO with Nelson Rockefeller. And that comes right out of the Rotarian. I will send both you and Vicky a link on that so y'all will have it. But it's right out of the Rotary. They're very proud of this. And if you start looking back in the UNESCO, their history, traveling around the world, where they put their little footprint, Katanga, Cuba, all these different places where you start having wars, Rotary International and United Nations NGOs show up there first. They start rearranging, just the same way they do, all of the economic structure of a country. The next thing you know, there's a war, there's a rebellion, and they bring in what they call humanist education, they've done this since World War II, since 1945, when they first started creating themselves. Literally, these guys believe that they are more divine or more something. They're higher, on a higher plane than us, and they're humanists, and that we should bow to them. We don't deserve to own resources. We should just be good little citizens and do as we're told to serve this element that they believe that they themselves are. And so they get
I ran into a guy, I was researching, and there was a guy in the Clinton administration. His name was Robert Shapiro. And he's one of those internationalists. He belongs to some organization I think it was over in Sweden. But I was looking at their stuff, and it's really very creepy.
Well, by all means, go on. This just sounds like it's been the plan all along. We can take this back to the think tanks of the older days, from Tavistock to Huxley and everybody else. It's a way to set up a system that appears to be for the benefit of everyone, but really in the end benefits only the few.
Well, that's the brilliance of everything that they're doing. They have been working on this for a long time, but in our lifetime, it's all being done administratively. And so everything that they're doing, all of their plans, what they want to do, There's documentation for all of it. There are no secrets here. But it's just that nobody, the people out in your community, they won't read any of this stuff because they make an assumption that it doesn't matter, that there's nothing important going on. We have the illusion of normalcy when there's absolutely nothing normal going on.
It's a horrible position to actually see it for yourself too. And once you do see it, you see it everywhere. You see it in commercials, you see it in billboards, in magazines, and advertisements. You see it everywhere. You see it written into the scripts of every TV show and every movie in Hollywood. You see it all over the place, and it's disturbing, and it makes you feel almost like well, sometimes it makes you, I don't know what the word is, but it makes you feel
alien?
Like, yeah, I mean, it's a horrible feeling to know this is going on and then to look around and see someone wearing a T-shirt that says "Go Green" or something, ridiculous like that. And without understanding what it is that they're promoting, the concept of useful idiots, basically left over from Lenin, people supporting communism from a faraway land.
It is total immersion.
I believe in sustainable development and going green, but I mean, it's an illusion. It's the trick. You're going to get this prize if you do what we tell you to do. What they have is not sustainable development. Well, it's sustainable for them. The economy right now is working perfectly for them, just like a fine-tuned machine.
It sustains the profits.
It sustains the profit. It transfers the wealth from the people who earn it to the people who steal it, to the parasites. I hesitate to call them elite because elite makes it sound like there's something good or above us. They're just some of the earth parasites, please.
Well,
I agree with you there.
The truth is they do believe that they are superior. And when you design an entire system of money and credit around your belief, well, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at the United Nations. I mean, that's what they designed, just to feed their ego. So we'll be back, folks. Stay with us.
Neighbor, welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Well, maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Corporation Nation radio program. One of my listeners made a good little point here, and he says that Dr. Julian Huxley was, of course, the first Director General of UNESCO. I actually forgot about that. And we're talking about the same guys who were involved in all the think tanks, Fabian socialism, and all of that. It's interesting because the Fabian socialists, their symbol is the turtle with a hammer. And basically, it says move slowly and strike powerfully, similar to carry a big stick. So what we've had over the last, 30, 40, 50 years is the slow incremental takeover of everything through this sustainability movement. We have the perfection of the turtle with the hammer Fabian socialist model. And right now, I kind of feel, guys, maybe you'll agree or disagree here, but I kind of feel like, as you said, Vicky, they are taking off their clothes. In other words, they are bearing it all at this point. And with the advent of Common Core, as we just read from UNESCO, where they're literally it feels like almost like they're now stepping up the pace and taking over an entire generation of through education to completely implement this. It's like they're going for broke at this point.
Oh, I think they are. I think the new millennium was the target date, and only they made it. Well, I don't know. 911 was like the signal, but yeah, I think they've been working on this for hundreds of years, and so I think it was at the turn of the new millennium when they wanted to bring it all to fruition. And they're doing it.
They're doing it at a pace. That's the thing. I mean, and the way that it's organized again is this consensus model, this Delphi technique, where anyone who argues is, of course, going to get an attack on their character, or, as Bob found out, an attack on their own land and home and equipment. Of course, they stole your equipment there, Bob, because you had the actual evidence against them. So,
but now we have all that back. They destroyed the computer, but we were able to. It took us like 3 days, but we were able to get it back up, and everything's intact, and we have all of that back intact again.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And that was
they're going for broke, and so somebody who lives in Podunk who's trying to mess with the agenda, they're so unimportant. They could just wipe you out, and
yep.
It doesn't matter to them because we're talking about this is a high stakes game they're playing. It's not a game, but
it's everything worth anything in the world.
Yeah, so they're going for broke.
Well, but my theory on that, what they're going for broke, is that this generation of them, I call them born on third base, thought they hit a home run, that generation. They don't have the seasoning and the skills, they're bloodlines, and they don't have the seasoning and the skills of the people who actually had to conceive of all this and really do the heavy lifting. These are spoiled, rotten kids that are obnoxious. They don't have what it takes. And so even though they don't have the patience that their grandparents' generation had. These guys don't have, but now they have the technology. I mean, it's not just a walk in the park. But these guys are very unskilled. They're very, they jump the gun. They do really stupid things. They can be taken out.
Yeah, they're very arrogant.
Yes, they are. When we, in Miami-Dade, when we were down working with the people in South Florida, we just, off the top of our head, started a thing. We never picked it back up, but it was Project Mayhem, and we called it At the Local Level on a National Scale, was a way to attack these people. And, of course, the Tea Party and all wanted to go to Washington, D.C. and put 2 million people up there standing on the grouse. We kept telling them, no, you can't sustain that fight. But you can fight week after week after week at the local level on a national scale. But I'm not the organizer. I'm the guy who goes out there and just goes toe-to-toe with them. That would take somebody else to do something like that.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of us are in that same boat where we know that the reason that these people are succeeding is because they are so damn organized. And we're sitting out here, a bunch of unorganized, if you will, libertarians that never get anything done because of our lack of organization. So obviously something needs to change here. One of the interesting things, I hate to tell people this, and it's something I'm going to research heavily, but I did find out that I believe that the the Libertarian Party and all the concepts revolving around that was actually a Koch brothers creation. The Tea Party may have also been a Koch brothers creation, and Ron Paul was actually the first person to head the organization that was created by the Koch brothers. So I have a feeling that the libertarian movement and the Tea Party movement are just like any other controlled revolutions or controlled parties, whereas, I remember my first Libertarian Party meeting, and it was my last one because they actually stated how proud they were to be so disorganized. And they knew it was their downfall, and yet it was part of the political model of the Libertarian Party. And I knew something was wrong then. So this is a subject that I'm going to cover later on after I really look into it. But I think that all of these things are set up to stop us from organizing. And I think you're exactly right, Bob. How do you organize without actually creating an organization that can be co-opted and steered in the wrong direction? That's the question. And that really is what we should be talking about today for the rest of the show, is how do we get to a point where we can solve this problem without resorting to blood shed, honestly. I mean...
Oh, and that's the last thing we want. We do not want to go to war with these guys, and all of a sudden they'd know what to do. They would treat us just like terrorists in some third world country and wipe us out. Mm-hmm. But as far as organizing and doing that, boy, it's like trying to show a rainbow to a dog. And I'm just...
Well, you know what? I have to admit, I have to confess, that I'm not a libertarian, first of all. I'm not a joiner. I don't belong to any groups. I just, I'm like a total loner. But I want to have freedom. I want everybody to have freedom. But you can't, what we're fighting is gang warfare. And so we are all anti-gang, trying to fight a gang individually. You can't do it. That's our Achilles heel.
I'm the very same. I won't join anything. I'm no party affiliation and just lone wolf. And yeah, I will not join, but that is an Achilles heel.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat because I not only joined, I actually tried to start an organization, We Are Change, and it just got co-opted and just failed. So trust me, I understand. I'm the same way, and we've got to do something about this. We'll be back, folks. Stay with us.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as a US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion. Despite protests and clashes in Athens streets, the IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the term economy entered our language from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. Well, how are we managing? Theories abound, but in practice, does anyone actually know what the hell's even happening? Well, seems we've come to our global auditing, our financial day of reckoning. It's an interesting quandary. Have we invested too much in this enterprise to admit the solution might lie in its very demise? For our real economy is something much broader. It's GDP measured not by our ability to hoard, but our capacity to relearn and earn our place in nature's order and thus remain on this planet Ark, our Pandora.
All right, folks, welcome back. Oh, this whole system... It certainly relies on the support of the people, and that's perhaps that's the best trick that these guys have done, is to manufacture consent. It's to create the pool of public funding to support all these corporations, to give them low interest loans out of taxpayer money, and to just all around in general make it so that people support it whether they like it or not, and feel like they have no power to do anything about it. That's the greatest trick of the devil, it seems. Well, what do you guys think?
It is a trick of the devil.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, yeah. I mean, the way that they do it. I mean, you always hear, how much corporations are being taxed. Well, that's not really true. They publish a tax rate, but they have this whole program of giving tax credits to corporations for doing social good, like building affordable housing. So you have corporations like your utility company building affordable housing. Well, whatever money the corporation spends on affordable housing, they're bumping up your utility rates to do it. So it's kind of like the privatization of taxation through a third party. It's very clever.
It's brilliant. I mean, it really is just. It's as if a bunch of attorneys sat around and figured this all out.
Yep. Oh, they did. These people are the most evil, monstrous people in the entire world. But looking at them, they're right out of GQ magazine and, right out of female entrepreneurs. I mean, the people who are writing this legislation, who are doing all this stuff, and they graduated from the best schools.
They went to finishing schools. I went to the Colt Military Academy. I rubbed elbows with them up until I was maybe 20.
That's right, Bob. You had a big what was it, a logging or construction company?
Well, I had when they first hit me, I had a company called Burton International, and I was designing and building lumber handling equipment for plywood plants, a little bit into the paper mills, furniture plants, flooring plants, that type thing. They tried to co-opt me and recruit me into their system, and I looked at it, and I just said, absolutely not. I won't have anything to do with this. And I really didn't like their cocaine and their prostitutes, and just their lifestyle was just not for me. And when they invite you in and you tell them no, you might as well, take up arms because they're coming after you. And
what was the process of trying to get you in? I'm just curious.
They started off, I don't watch football, but they decided they were going to take me to football games in their sky boxes. And I'd be up there with judges and senators and congressmen. And they started trying to just good old boy me into the system and talk about what a wonderful future I could have.
Well, and who was they? Who was it that was actually funding it?
I never really knew who was behind these guys. There was a guy, I'll just call him BG because I don't want to put his name out on the radio. And I was there with just judges, but there was obviously somebody behind them. They themselves had been bought. They had gotten up there. It was just very obvious to me. I wasn't as drunk or whatever as they were. That these guys were watching them with these underage prostitutes and that kind of thing, so they would own them. And then they would use these guys to come in and do their dirty work, to try to get you, oh, come on, one of the boys, let's go have some fun.
That's an interesting theory. I've heard that espoused before, that the reason that they do a lot of this ritual sacrifice and stuff like that is to get you on film, so that they have that film footage, so that if you ever get out of line, well, suddenly you're in jail as a child killer or child rapist or anything else.
Assured destruction.
Yeah.
Well, and the way I consider it, just on an individual basis, is everybody finds themselves a level of, I'm not the best person on the planet, but I'm not going where they go. But everybody finds themselves a level of how good of a person they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Really, to be against these people and to resist them, you have to have, zero, almost selfless, almost, you've got to do without luxuries of modern life and things in order to resist these people. It is a fight of good and evil, but you'll go to your local county commissioner or somebody, and he's really not that bad of a guy, but he has picked a place where he wants to be in life, and he's gotten himself comfortable, and it's getting him the things that he wants from life. He's not willing to, he knows he needs to do better, but he's not willing to go that far to be that good of a guy because it would cost him these luxuries he's become accustomed to. And that's literally a thing you're up against. The people that should be standing beside you and fighting this are really not that, a lot of them are really not that bad of people, but they're not willing to give up. They know it's the machine that feeds them.
Well, and it's a case of, you see it so often, people literally get invested or vested in their particular industry or government or whatever to the point where they literally give up everything in their character. And character, of course, is also a legal standing. I won't get into that today. Let's take a call. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions and a lot of frustrations, because I know a lot of people across the country have tried to fight this on their own local levels and have been Delphi'd right out of the rooms. Let's take Marilyn in Nevada. How you doing, Marilyn?
Love your show. You're a favorite. But
thanks.
it's a great show, great message. I just wish more people could hear it. Is it possible to get this on YouTube or something where we could share it with people?
Well, I do have a website where, fortunately, one of my listeners actually takes all the shows and puts them on a website that edits out the commercials, and that is Corporation Nation Radio Archives.
Okay.
It's a long address. Corporation Nation Radio Archives.wordpress.com. And of course, we always like for people to support the station and get the archives that way, and to support the sponsors as well.
I have the archives for RBN, but, people are not going to pay to go in to the archives, so if you could put it, it needs to get out. And
well, and while we're on this particular subject, I would love it for people to start, I don't know, guerrilla advertising this show, because hopefully I've proven it, my character by this point. We're not afraid to talk about anything here, and we're going to always talk about the truth and figure this out. So please, by all means, call in to whoever else's show, tell them this is going on, send it out, because, it's the only way. I don't have any power or money to advertise this myself, so I rely on people to do it for me if you value what you hear here. So go on, please.
We all need to do better. Corporation Nation Radio Archives?
radioarchives.wordpress.com.
Okay. Listen, wouldn't it just be simpler if people would wake up and we just get out of the United Nations?
That would be awesome, but we'd also have to get out of the other international agreements as well, all the international trade agreements, because they really sold our country, our people down the river with those agreements.
And Rotary International and Lions Club and Chamber of Commerce.
What did you think about what Australia did coming out and said they're not playing the game of global warming anymore?
Oh, I didn't hear that. That's great. That's fabulous.
I heard about that, but I do have the concern that Australia, of course, is under its own little United Nations, which is the United Kingdom, so I don't know how that's going to play out.
I know. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, folks, if you'd like to call in as well, it's 800-313-9443. We got another 10 or 15 minutes to go. Stay with us.
Looking around you, we're lost in space, and the earth is your home.
Clear your mind of questions. You must unlearn what you have learned.
All right, folks, welcome back. Oh, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to remind you that tomorrow we have pre-recorded an interview with Dr. Tim O'Shea, thedoctorwithin.com, a wonderful, wonderful man with wonderful books, and his website is more than just he's actually a doctor of chiropractic, and ironically, it seems that chiropractors seem to be the only people out there in the medical field that know what the heck's going on, or at least care to admit it. I guess it's because they're not vested in the system like medical doctors are with all their licensing and everything, and pharmaceutical contracts and perks. Also has a great dieting and detox programs that are on the site. Highly recommended for folks. So, guys, did you have anything else you wanted to get across? We'll take another caller here, but we're really stuck on when we come to this part of it. When it comes to Agenda 21, we get stuck on the solution part because, organization is a paradigm of the people who perpetrate this on us, obviously. So, what can we do?
Exactly. Go ahead, Bob.
Exactly.
See the organization there? I'd say individually counterattack using the official forum and the Constitution. And, of course, the Constitution is not flawless, but it's not perfect for them either. So we actually counterattack in the official forums, in the county commissions, anywhere we can get our boots on the ground.
Well, and what I do, I do what I do best, which is to look at organization and to document process and procedure, to try and explain to people what's going on. Because, there are not many people actually that will read the kind of stuff that I do, watch the kind of things that I do, and then write about it. So I figure that's what I do best, and so that's my contribution.
Absolutely, and that's, of course, why I have you on here. We are sort of two birds of the same feather, where we have trained ourselves to really enjoy reading the most boring documents, but primary source documents, not someone else's fiction or idea of what's going on, but what's actually going on. And so I'm sort of in the same boat there. That's an overwhelming task to go through these documents and actually decipher them so that people can actually understand what the heck's going on. Because again, the word pillow can mean rock in their language. It's very difficult. Now, my personal thought on this, for anybody that's interested, is I wrote a very long piece on, it was geared towards chemtrails or geoengineering, but it could be applied to anything. And that is for every single person out there to take the initiative individually, not in a group, although a central website where you could download some letters would be great. But if everybody out there suddenly started writing legal demands and suing their government and saying, look, I don't consent to this, I don't consent to any United Nations treaties, agreements, or anything else, no sustainable development, no Agenda 21, and put that out there in the record, and actually in the public record, at that point, they can no longer claim that they have the unanimous consent of the public. And at that point, because it's now on the record, then people could actually sue and say, look, you're claiming to have the consent of the people. You have 2,000 people in this county alone that have written letters of demand that you cease and desist your participation in whatever it is. It could be anything. It could be, like I said, geoengineering, which they have to announce to the people through public notices in the newspaper, surprisingly. Anything. This concept would actually work for. So once there's an actual record of the non-consent of the people in the public record, that's the point where they're going to be actually breaking the law. Until that happens, then they're just basically saying, well, we have the tacit consent of the manufactured consent that we got from the public. We announced it in the newspaper. We had a public meeting. So, that's the only thing I can think of, honestly, to actually make what they're doing illegal. So, I'm sure there's a lot of ideas. Let's go back to the phones and take Carol in Idaho. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, thanks, Clint. Hi, Vicky, and is it Bob?
Bob, yes.
Yes. I just want to thank all three of you for a terrific broadcast. It's so helpful and so encouraging to have you guys out front digging all this up and then sharing it with us. Bob, when you spoke of having been, or they attempted to recruit you, the big boys, and then what happened to you afterwards, you reminded me of Aaron Russo, and I just want to ask, do any of you, or did any of you ever suspicion about the fact that Aaron Russo didn't live a long time after Nick Rockefeller cozied up to him, befriended him, and tried to recruit him? Anybody have any suspicion about his all too premature death?
I did not know he was dead.
2009, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
I didn't really think about it, but I did have some communications with Aaron Rousseau, because the timing of his book was just a bit too coincidental to the promotion of the fair tax. But, you know, I have to give him this much. He may not have known about the fair tax.
Mm-hmm.
He may not have understood what part he was playing, which everything is indirect. Everything is kind of asymmetric.
I never heard him speak in favor of anything to replace the income tax. Did he?
No, but there was a whole movement of people that came out at the same time, who kind of rode on his coattails.
Oh, I never connected the two, but I detest any kind of a national sales tax, fair tax, flat tax, you name it.
Well, too bad, because that's part of the Communist Manifesto, and we're living it. So, you know, it's a necessary and integral part, along with the central bank and control of education. So sorry, but if we're going to have a good communist country, you're going to have to accept that, my dear.
Oh, sure. Hey, thank you very much, all of you.
All right.
God bless.
I know it's a balancing act.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
It's a balancing act to make sure when you go to pushing buttons, locally or at a state level or whatever, it is a balancing act to make sure that you leave an avenue to where you're not an easy target. And we have to be conscious of that constantly. Y'all should as well.
Yeah, and the you know, I was warned when I started. Even Walter Burien warned me about talking about Kafirs that I'd be a target. And there's, you know, when you talk to some of these old timers that have grown up through the chemical weapons era, cancer which is what he died of, a fast-acting cancer. Cancer is a weapon of choice. Your milk could be tainted. The concept is out there. The patents are out there for, you know, various fast-acting cancers. So it's not at all unthinkable. I tend to err on the side of caution when I see anyone in the mainstream and, if you will, of the blood coming out with a documentary. So, in my opinion, most of those types of revolutionary things are very contrived and have a purpose. Controlled opposition is the favorite term there. Let's take Fred in Michigan real quick. Sorry, Fred, we're running out of time, but good to hear from you again.
Solutions. Okay, so Karen Hudis, the World Bank whistleblower, stated in interviews that the common people do have the power to convene common law grand juries, although she did not delineate the precise process to accomplish that. However, Edwin Vieira, I've got his book ordered through Barnes & Noble, How to Dethrone the Imperial Judiciary, but he's got also Pieces of Aid and Constitutional Homeland Security, The Sword and Sovereignty. And, Clint, I hope you can start having Edwin Vieira on a regular basis. Ralph Winterow out of Alaska last Sunday delineated the fact that in Alaska and all the other states, it is now official that the Uniform Commercial Code is the law of the land in all the states, and therefore, we can actually make good use of UCC 1-308, which states that I'm reserving my common law right not to be bound nor compelled to perform under any contract, commercial agreement, bankruptcy I did not enter into knowingly, voluntarily, intentionally. Furthermore, the reservation...
Oh, sorry, Fred, we're just coming in. Stay tuned for Bob Tuskin. Thanks to my guests. All right, folks, see you tomorrow.